What, now let's ask a big question. What's the thing you're most proud of over your service to New York State?
Welcome to Subject to Change with our guest, Sandy Daigler.
Well, I'm proud of some projects. Really proud of the project that I did at Hutchings Psychiatric Center in Syracuse. So we renovated an adult patient building, and you just had to walk through that building before the renovation. The rooms were tiny. You had a sense like the walls were closing in on you because everything was so dark and constricted. And when I walked through it, when it was done, it was totally different. It was open and light and airy. We actually did two buildings and connected them, and they had an internal courtyard. And I just remember walking through the finished product and feeling like, this is amazing. I can't believe this is the same space. And I talked to some of the staff there, and they said, wow, we're really seeing a difference with the patients. They're really responding to the openness of the space. And, I wasn't the architect, but I was the project manager for it. And I just felt happy to have had a role in something like that. And I think in general, that's what I feel the most proud of is lots of projects that do really good things, for not just psychiatric patients, but students at SUNY campuses for projects we did for SUNY, and, people that lived in group homes for projects we did for OPWDD. Just a lot of good things that we did for the people in this state. And, I'm glad I was a part of that. My first job was I was an inspector for Medicaid funding. So I would go to the home and I would do an inspection, and then it was part of the you know the hoops they had to go through to get certified for Medicaid funding. So I just drove all over the state inspecting facilities for life safety code compliance. And
Wow.
I did that for about a year, and then I thought, I've really got to get a broader experience than this. So then I went to OGS and worked in the design and construction group for 16 years before I came to DASNY.
That's great. And then DASNY has done some smaller projects in-house, but typically uh, uh, hires consultants to do the design work. And then we do
Yes.
construction oversight.
Although when I first joined DASNY, we had a pretty robust interior in-house design group.
Mhm.
And I did quite a few small projects, and that was a lot of fun.
It's just big.
Are there any challenges that you see in state service that you saw maybe change over time or you wish would have changed over time?
Well, they're big bureaucracies, right?
It's like just nail it right there.
Yeah, I mean, you just have to deal with layer upon layer upon layer of stuff. And it would get frustrating sometimes, but you just had to kind of keep the long view, just keep looking forward and say, well, we'll get there eventually. So I don't know if you can have a big group of people without some kind of bureaucracy forming. It seems to be a human thing.
Actually, that's one of the things I've always admired about you in working with you is that even when there was a very significant restriction or a frustration, you always were able to take that breath and still bring the long view to the table or say, hey, yeah, we're getting this resistance, but let's talk about what's behind that resistance.
Right.
And that's a skill that not a lot of people have, and a skill that I'm seeking to cultivate in myself.
Public speaking.
The other thing that I really enjoyed in the last few years of my career was the training stuff that we worked on. I just love speaking in public. I mean, that might sound strange because I know that's, fear. People fear that, but I don't fear that. And I just like being able to get up and give people information. It's
Yeah.
it's something I really enjoy. In the presentation that I put together, that introduction to sustainability that we did last year,
Awesome.
I really enjoyed that. That was so much fun.
Who were the end users that saw that presentation?
That was all internal in
Okay.
DASNY.
Okay.
But what was exciting about it is we tried to, and Sandy was instrumental in this. We tried to present sustainability not in a hey, you have to do this kind of way, but in a look, this is our current circumstance. this is the current response to the circumstance. How can sustainability actually inform that response? And I think it woke up a bunch of people that hadn't yet understood, which is powerful.
Knowledge bites.
The other fun thing was Knowledge Bites.
Oh, that was
Your
great.
knowledge.
We did
bites.
this program called Knowledge Bites. It was so much fun. We just put together a whole bunch of presentations on different topics and just presented them, on did we have like a monthly schedule or
We
something
had
like
a
that?
monthly schedule for a little while.
So these are internal again?
Actually, they weren't just internal.
No?
No,
No.
we got them certified by AIA
Yeah.
for learning unit credits, and we actually marketed them to other state agencies.
Yeah. So we did things like, what's a post-occupancy evaluation? And then we did over a slide deck presentation, a recording of the different facets of a post-occupancy evaluation and why it's important and how it can be used. We did that with maybe 6 or 7 different topics, including zero net energy, when zero net energy was just really being talked about. So all of that was very fun, and how to lead charrettes, like for actual goal setting as opposed to checklist stuff.
Goldilocks.
My third project with, I'll say OGS, but as a consultant and specifically as the lead consultant on the project. And I feel a little bit like Goldilocks, where like the first time was maybe a little too much, then a little too little. And now my goal is to go in and be just right. But the charrette process, that is the thing that I think has happened a little late in my first 2 projects. And so to get everybody of the same mindset earlier on, I'm excited about. And I'm always surprised at how people still talk about this so late, and they think it's something that can just be like plugged in.
It's a process, not a thing.
Maybe we can talk for a second on what we think has created that ongoing feeling that sustainability stuff can be plugged in at the 60% level.
I think it's just a lack of understanding. We're so used to checking the boxes. We're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And I think partly because for a while LEED was the only game in town.
Right.
So everybody had pulled out that LEED checklist and check, we're doing these 5 things and now we're sustainable. And I don't think they understand that sustainability is not a thing. It's a process, right? You have to engage people. You have to get everybody's input early on. It's a process. It's a conversation. And I don't think most people have had that realization. And I don't know why that is, but I know for me that's kind of my evolution. I mean, I remember going to a charrette for one of those projects at Hutchings Psychiatric Center. And I think, Jody, you came with me. It was the charrette. And I said, why don't you come with me? And the consultant whipped out the LEED checklist. And I remember your face was like, oh no. But, I was thinking, why is Jody upset? This is what we're doing, and it took a while for me to see that as well. So I think you just have to know more about it, and you start to see that it's not a thing. It's
funny, I will never play poker. Let's put it that way. My face portrays that every time I see a checklist, and it's not okay. When sustainability is new, a checklist is much better than not dealing with sustainability. But we've had the idea in buildings of sustainability for a solid track record of over 20 years. And that was the second iteration, because in the 70s, there was a lot of attention to sustainability as well. So let's say we've had a transformative 20 years. After those 20 years, I honestly think it's time to realize that the checklist is the bare minimum, and that we are capable of much more than that. And that excites me. And it scares and offends people who and I'm not judging this, who feel like they're doing a very good job. And there's got to be some way to tell people it's not that they're not doing a good job at all. It's another layer of understanding to again improve the work.
Built on a shaky foundation of carbon.
The thing that concerns me is so much of our current systems, our economy, just so much of everything sits on a foundation of carbon.
Mhm.
And I don't think that people who aren't educating themselves about climate change and about sustainability, that they really understand the magnitude of the change that has to happen. I mean, it's pretty significant. And I was reading an article today about how carbon and oil investments, how prevalent they are in so many, for companies, for different financial funds. Everything is resting on this foundation of carbon. And when I mean, we have this huge technological challenge before us to electrify and to get the infrastructure to electrify. So that's one whole part of it.
Mhm.
But once that stuff happens, those oil investments are not going to be worth what they're worth now.
Right.
And I just worry about what impact that will have on the economy if it's not recognized, so there can be a plan for how to move away from that, as
Yeah.
opposed to, the floor falling through. And then what happens to, to people's retirement investments and things like that. So I
Yeah.
it just scares me sometimes to think about just how much we're sitting on this foundation of carbon. That's the only way I can think of it. And when that goes away, if we're not thinking about that and planning for that to make that transition, I just worry about what will happen.
Avoiding calamity.
Yeah, so ESG is becoming more prominent in investing, and it's actually something that the state is looking at regarding bond work and other investment work,
Right.
which is fantastic. So that's environmental social governance metrics to understand if the investment is supporting the environment, the social structures, and yeah, I think it's a kind of Wild West situation now, and maybe we need to find somebody who's savvy about ESG to 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 talk with. I think that would be quite exciting. It
Mhm.
also reminds me of a conversation we recently had with Jimmy Marinder, who's a spa manager in Sweden, and we talked with him about how the economy in Scandinavia as a whole is they judge their success of their economy based on a happiness index rather than a GDP, gross domestic product. So that is a much better metric for encapsulating at least the social aspects of, because we have a problem in the US. If we base on GDP, when there's a hurricane and then there's huge investment in rebuilding everything that was destroyed, that pushes the GDP up. But that has nothing to do with success or happiness or vibrancy or evolution. It has to do only with fixing problems that were caused by poor actions to start with. So those are a couple of things that I think are really fascinating. And I do think that more and more people, more and more organizations are starting to realize that divestment is needed. But how that's structured is a thing I know nothing about.
That transition, if it's not going to be calamitous, it needs to be planned so that it's a gradual kind of a thing.
Carbon and climate.
Who doesn't know, and how can we help them to understand it and be part of it?
So I feel like I have an easy inroad for that because of my position as a college professor at 2 universities. And so similar to the Knowledge Bites, there's a couple of my classes that begin with kind of an overall sustainability presentation. What it is, why we need it, etc. And the thing that's happened this year that was very simple is that I was sitting, I have a morning routine. I was sitting drinking my coffee, and on the TV, Ida had happened a couple days before. And then New York City and New Jersey actually saw, at least at that point, the more deaths than Louisiana had. And I was taking the picture of the thing that said that this was a once in a 500-year storm. And if you go back and you obviously look at the math to the last times that both Louisiana and New York City were hit with major things, they were like 12 years. I go, so we're having 100 and 500-year storms every 12 years. The math is not penciling out, right? Like these numbers are not the same. And so to then back into how do we approach it? And really it's now at this point, it is your profession's duty. This is your role. I am empowering you to be the group that, we're working on it. And we're kind of like what Jody said, we're at this point, and the work that some of us have done to this point has been solid, but you guys are going to need to carry this on. And the things that we've thought about to date, we're working with existing technology and, building systems. And I said, but those are going to continue to change. And it's your job to learn what's out there and learn what's new and then project it forward. We're all kind of in that right now. It's all our job day to day to make sure that we're doing that. But like, this is the next generation of designers and architects coming through, and it is their job.
Well, so
it's all of our job.
It's all of our jobs.
The role of the AIA.
Sandy has been involved with the American Institute of Architects for quite some time, and it's actually upping her involvement now that she's retired, from what I understand, which is really cool. Here's a question: that the AIA is an advocacy group, and there's been a lot of discussion in the AIA, and quite, I would say, forcefully resistive discussion. Some members are saying, architecture and the AIA should not get involved in this climate change debate. It's not our job. And some members are saying we need to do more. Sandy, how do you feel? What do you think the role is of the AIA? Or, is there something that you've spotted that you want to talk about with that group?
I think the role of the AIA is to get information to its membership. And so that we have the most up-to-date information to work with, to do some of the things that we did at DASNY, trainings and information sessions. Buildings are such a huge percentage of the energy that we use. And I think they should advocate. I think it's a good idea. I don't think, sitting on the sidelines and pretending to be neutral, I don't think that gets us anywhere. So I'm glad they're advocating.
So architects really, when you think about profession and professional responsibility, we should be advising our clients, the people we serve, at that level of professionalism, as a doctor would advise someone about their health future. And
these things are not opinions. Climate change is not an opinion. It's a science. And I think we have a duty to respond to the science and to advocate for it. And I think we can play a role in talking to our clients and helping them to understand, what we're up against. Because in the end, it's not going to be architects that are going to save the day, or engineers or anybody else. It's going to be everybody working together. So if we can advocate to our clients and say, listen, this is important. We're facing a crisis. There are things we need to do. I think that's a good thing.
Architecture 2030.
I think the AIA did very well in adopting the 2030 Architecture 2030 challenge. I feel that they didn't implement enough of a process to bring that to the architecture firms and advise and support the architecture firms achieving those goals. Things are easier to do in new buildings if you're paying attention to reducing the carbon and reducing the energy use and reducing the operational carbon and getting off of fossil fuels. But one of the quotes from Architecture 2030 is that 85% of the buildings that will exist in 2035 already exist today.
Yeah.
So we have to also reframe our entire profession to not focus on new buildings, but focus on reuse of buildings and renovation of buildings in an intelligent, carbon neutral way. it's quite exciting. There's an avenue there to preserve the history and have the stories like Sandy started the conversation with, and recognize how a building has transitioned over time and tell those stories. I think that's quite exciting. So
and to make use of all that embodied carbon that's already here.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Why recreate all that when it's already here?
Sandy, who's your hero?
Who has inspired you, or who do you feel could be inspiring to other people that you want to share?
I think I'm really inspired by Hillary Clinton.
Yay.
And what inspires me about her is just the fact that she just sticks to it. And she's been banged around and defeated, and I mean, more than any person I can think of. Probably there's somebody else, but I just really appreciate the way that she falls down and she gets back up and she does it again. And she does it better than she did it before. You know, she's a first lady, then she's a senator, then she's the secretary of state, you know, and I just really inspire her stick-to-itiveness and her optimism and her work with human rights and women's rights.
Yeah, I like that part too. I also like to add on to that the fact that she defaults more to humor, even though humor is not something she's really good at. She doesn't get bitter, and
Right,
she doesn't punch back,
right.
which I've always appreciated. You
And
know?
the thing I think she never got enough credit for was the fact that she stayed with her husband. I mean, a lot of people said, you know, she should have kicked him out. He's, you know, he's a dog, all that kind of stuff. But she made her marriage work under incredibly difficult circumstances, and I don't think she gets enough credit for that.
Yeah, great point.
And what's the most important thing right now?
I think the thing that I'm most excited about now, politically, is this soft infrastructure bill that includes 2 years of free preschool and 2 years of free community college. I think that would remake our country if every kid had 2 years of preschool and every young person had the opportunity to go to 2 years of community college. So education of the next generation is the most critical thing. So I'm really excited about that, hoping that the infrastructure bill will go through with those provisions in it. I mean, one thing that's always bothered me when people complain about paying school taxes, you know, I don't have any kids, so, you know, why do I have to pay school taxes? Education, it's not something you achieve. It's a societal good. It's not a personal achievement. Well, it is a personal achievement, but more than that, it's a societal good to have an educated populace. So anytime anybody wants to promote more education, I'm there, and I don't mind paying my school taxes because all those kids, they're going to be my doctor someday. So
That's I
Right.
love
I'm all on board.
all of those kids. They're going to be my doctor someday.
Exactly. Or
And
my lawyer or my police, you know, the policeman that I call when I have a problem.
that's awesome.
Thanks for spending time with us.
I totally appreciate everything you've shared with us today. What a great conversation.
Yes, thank you.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I really felt honored to be invited.
This was really gracious.
This has been Subject to Change, a sustainability podcast.
Have a good night, guys.
Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Enjoy
Have a
your
good evening.
games. Bye.
Bye.